all of you have had now a chance to talk with her, and it's so enlightening to speak with her about her work, so I'm going to be very short in what I'm saying so that you can get to the main part. But I just wanted to say that I met Lyne through this amazing collaborative project that she was doing with artists in northern Quebec, in Louisville, who had no studio, no art programs at all. And Lyne came up with her little press, and she'll tell you all about that. But that's why I met Lyne. And she was so determined that these women's art would come out that we ended up having a large show here, got some support for it. And one of them is in the Musée de Beaux-Arts, and the other is in a major private collection in Toronto, the two big murals. So I met her through that. I started looking at her. Well, actually, I saw your art before that. I was at an art fair in New York City and saw this booth and saw these amazing drawings and went in and said, who is this? And that's when I first saw her work. So that was before her project. At any rate, I am delighted to welcome all of you. I hope that after the talk you will join us for more wine and goodies. And I will now hand over to Lyne.
Thank you, Pat. First, thank you all for being here. This is my first solo show in Toronto, and I had this fear that I would find myself alone with my daughter and my husband at my first show, because that happened to me when I was just out of art school. So I'm glad to see all of you here. So how does a Québécois woman from Montreal end up at the Healy Fine Arts having a show? I imagine that some people would ask that question. I have a history with Inuit art from way back. I always loved Inuit art, but when I was in graduate school at Concordia University in Montreal, one week I went with my fellow students, colleagues to Ottawa. There was a major show that we wanted to see there at the museum, and we went to the museum. But after that, we went to what was then called the Museum of Civilization. I think it changed its name since then. But there was a huge show of Inuit art from Nunavut, mostly from Cape Dorset. And there, I discovered the work of Parr. And I was blown away, because here I was in graduate school, and you know, with all of these years of studies in visual arts, and I was looking at this man's art, and he started making art when he was in his 60s, out of a small camp in Nunavut, and people started printing his work in Cape Dorset, and he became known worldwide, but it was unique. I had never seen anything like it. He was all about hunting and fishing and living on the land. And his work was, and still is, brought down to the minimum. It was very minimalist. If he wanted to say something about nature, about animals in the north, it was just that floating on the page, and it was powerful. And I don't even remember what show I came to see in Ottawa that week. I don't remember what the work was, but I remember Parr. I remember the excitement of discovering that work. And when I came back, I started to research Inuit art. I read a lot about it, and my work, I always aimed at simplifying the work and bringing it down to the essentials. And so we go down years later. I meet my husband, and this is it's at the beginning of the year 2000, and then and he happened to work for the Inuit School Board. So he was traveling back and forth to Nunavut, going to different communities, meeting students that would be welcome to college, French college in the South. And so I always envied him, because for years he would leave to go into Nunavut. in the villages and I didn't get to go, that he would come back and tell me stories, and I so envied him. And then, through all kinds of circumstances, I had the chance to go up there with him. I guess it was 2012, and we got off the plane in Iwivik, which is the last village in Nunavik, and I fell in love. You know, it's like the first time you meet someone and you fall in love and your heart is beating, and this is it. And I said to my husband, I want to live here. And he was kind of stunned because he had lived in Kujalapik for about 5 years, way at the beginning of his teaching career. And he was kind of stunned that I would want to move there. And our children, my daughter, who was right about his head there, was in college at the time, and we thought, well, our kids are all grown up and on their own, so this is a good time. So we moved up there. Actually, I wanted to go to Iwivik. We came down every community on the Hudson Bay shore during that trip, that I wanted to go to Iwivik. But and eventually I said, well, if there is no teaching job for you in Iwivik, I would go anywhere, but not Pavilnituk. We ended up in Pavilnituk for 1 year. The only reason I didn't want to go was that it's one of the biggest villages, and I wanted to go somewhere small, more community oriented. And so we spent a year in Pavilnituk, came back to Montreal, and then while I was in Pavilnituk, I was teaching printmaking. I wanted to do something else than just my own work while I was there. I wanted to contribute something to the community, and the only way I knew how to do that was through art. And so I started to teach a printmaking class there, and I met with one Inuit woman, a young woman named Maggie Napakdu, and I worked with her a lot. She came to do an artist residency with me in Montreal, and but eventually I got invited to do artist workshops in the north, in other communities. While we were still in Montreal, I went up to a first community and then another, and then I ended up in Iwivik giving a workshop there. And while I was there, I found out that there was a teaching job coming up the following year. So I called Mark that night from the hotel and I said, hey, there's a teaching job next year that's available. And so by the time I came back home after that workshop, we knew that we were coming to settle in Iwivik the following September. So long story short, we ended up living there for 5 years. And it is undoubtedly one of the greatest experiences of my whole life. It totally altered my way of seeing the world, of seeing the landscape, of seeing Inuit people and culture. And I was very fortunate because living there year after year, I came to develop friendships with people, relationships with people that I so value, and people that I still connect with today. And of course, I was going on doing my own work. We created several printmaking projects collaboratively, and that's how I connected with this gallery, although I came as a client before that, when I started coming to show Pat what we were working on up north in Iwivik. The work wasn't even completed that I was showing her, and she said, I love it, I want to show it here. And so when the project was completed, it traveled back to Fahilis, and we had our first show here, and it was a great success. It was wonderful. The women came with me. We came from Iwivik and spent several days here, and it was a wonderful experience. And then we had another printmaking show just last year, and it was also another highlight of the northern experience. And while I was there, at one point a few years ago, I started to show the women what I was doing in my work. Of course, they saw because they came to work in my house, because there was nowhere in the community where we could work, because there's a housing shortage in the Inuit communities as it is. And so my husband is the one who said, well, you're using, half of the living room for your studio, so you might as well use the whole thing and invite people to work with you. And so I did. And so eventually we got a bigger press, and then it wasn't just the living room, it was also the kitchen, and it was also, so our whole first floor became a printmaking studio. And we had great fun working there. And at some point the women saw what I was, some drawings, I showed them some drawings that I had done years before. And they said, wow, can you teach us to work like that? And I said, sure. And so I started teaching them drawing. I ordered pencils, the colored pencils that I was using, and paper and so on. And we started drawing. And so that was another page that was turned. And I actually did like the drawing that's right behind all of you there on the wall on itself. I did that drawing while I was teaching them, because they wanted to know how I did this and how I did that. And so when I got to a certain point in the drawing, I would tell them, well, come and see, I'm going to show you how to do this. And so then they would go and sit down and work and do their own drawing. And then some of them said, I would like to, my work to eventually get, I like to play with the idea of abstraction. And I already kind of was on the edge of working with abstraction. Some of my work was totally abstract before that. And I did these two drawings while I was there as well. And so it was a great learning experience for them, but it was wonderful for me as well, because I was drawing from nature. I was drawing what I saw in my environment, and they were learning from it and enjoying it a great deal. And they actually showed some of those drawings that they did there at Fahili's also, and they sold those drawings to the Museum of Fine Arts in Montreal, so they're extremely proud of that, and so am I. And then Pat invited me to show my work here as a solo artist, and so by that time I was back in Montreal. My husband retired, and so we came back to Montreal. I still have connections with the North, and I think I would say at this point that the North is very much a part of me. You don't just leave the North and then go on to something else. It sort of inhabits you somehow. And so these are, the canoes are done from drawing from the photographs that I took in the North, because I found that that was something really wonderful to have these elements, these canoes or sleighs and all kinds of things that we consider artifacts, that are artifacts, but we feel that they're art related. They're so beautiful. They're like sculptures in nature. I started photographing all of that, but the canoes already had a strong meaning for me because I come from Abitibi, the Abitibi region, which is north, but it's not way up north in Nunavut. But growing up, I grew up in families that hunted and went fishing, and so the canoe was part of my environment. And it's also so Canadian. It's a very strong, iconic figure, and it's also a vessel, a container. To me, it's such a strong symbol. And I started to draw it and became very involved. And I've never done anything so large, so long. This is 8 feet long. And, but it's also very contemplative. People ask me, how can you do this? I mean, how long does this take you? And it takes days and weeks and months because I sit there and I just draw and draw and draw and draw. And this is my meditation space. This is, to me, when I sit at my drawing table, it's almost like a prayer. It's total involvement. It's, we hear a lot about being in the moment. And to me, while I'm doing this, it is being in the moment. And I'm hoping that it also conveys that to the viewer, the sense of tranquility, the sense of peace and calm that I got from living in the North and trying to keep while I'm back into the hustle and bustle of living in the cities. So thank you for being here and for allowing me to share this experience with you.